It was the year 2016 when I lived in New York City. I used to work at Wall Street at the time, and like every New Yorker, our main transportation was taking the subway. Anyone that has visited New York has taken the subway at least once. Let's say it's not the prettiest and safest at times. It was mid-August when I was working late and my co-workers wanted to grab a drink on 60th Wall Street to relax after a very difficult day on the market. We had 2 beers and around 10 p.m. we all decided to go our separate ways and head home. I lived by the Brooklyn Bridge, so I had about a 30-minute subway ride. I headed down to my station, tapped my card to go through, and I noticed there were a few homeless people there and just your regular New Yorkers waiting for the train. I headed inside the subway and noticed there was an empty seat. I thought to myself, great, this is going to be a smooth ride. I've never had any issues taking the subway, but I've had friends and heard some horrific stories. As the subway pulls away, I noticed a homeless man was sitting few seats behind me. He kept making some strange noises. I didn't put much attention to it. I had my earphones on. There weren't that many people on the subway. Few minutes go by and I noticed the man kept licking his hands, then licking the ground. I was like, what the hell is going on? The man seemed like he was on drugs. I turned around and kept my own business. Few minutes go by and I see the man going on a crazy rant. He was screaming to no one, but the things he kept saying was disturbing. He kept saying, I'm going to kill you. Do you understand? Look at me. I could see people moving away from this person. I thought about moving seats, but I knew I could defend myself if anything happened. As the screams got louder, I turned to look at him directly and I see him look for something in his bag. He pulls out a knife. The knife was about 7 inches long. This homeless person starts to wave the knife around and continue to scream. This man kept saying, you all must leave now. At this point, I turned my music off and paid attention to what was happening. We arrived at the next stop and more people come into the train. Everyone notices that this man looks like danger. Most of them go the opposite way. The homeless man gets up from his seat and looks at me directly in the eye. In this moment, I felt something was going to happen. I am now his target. He comes towards me and says, what are you looking at, you clown? I ignored him and slowly started to walk away. He follows me by the exit door and screams, you did this to me, and stabs me on my lower back. I was shocked that this just happened. I remembered falling to the ground and feeling my wound. I noticed that I was bleeding. I didn't know how bad the stab was at the time. I don't remember what happened after since I blacked out, but people that happened to be there told me. They said once the subway stopped, the homeless man ran and took off. Everyone didn't interfere because no one wanted to be hurt. Few bystanders called the police and they arrived. I was only 1 exit away from making it home. Luckily, I survived and recovered. But this homeless man was never caught. I couldn't believe that this happened to me. I will never forget this day. The crime in New York is becoming scarier and scarier. There's not much I could do afterwards but to continue to take the same subway. This story happened about 2 years ago, right after the pandemic ended. I live in the Bronx, but I commute to work in Tribeca. The only way to get to work is by taking the subway. I'm 38 years old. I worked at a popular agency in Tribeca. I never had any problems taking the subway, but I've come close to have some scary stories. After getting out of work, I decided to stop and get some quick groceries before taking the subway. Once I finished purchasing, I headed down the subway in 8th Avenue to go home. I noticed that the train was really busy. If you have ever been to New York, there are times that it's impossible to breathe because we are all jammed together. I hop in the train to headed home. I'm looking around me and noticed this old man who had a large backpack on was behind me. He kept looking at me and I noticed that this man isn't giving the greatest feeling. He shakes his head. I looked the other way. He doesn't seem like he is homeless, but more like he just got out of prison. I wasn't worrying too much just because it was really crowded in there. As I'm standing, I noticed someone's hand touched my butt. I screamed out of being shot. Everyone looks around and says, "Are you okay, miss?" I'm looking at the guy and asked him, "Did you just touch my ass?" The man denies and looks the other way. At this point, I'm aware of everyone around me. Few minutes go by and I notice that someone grabbed my leg, but it was coming from another direction. I was looking at the man and realized that this man wasn't the one that grabbed my leg. I was so confused. I noticed that I had 10 people circled around me, but everyone was going through the same thing. 5 minutes go by and at this point it seems like people are going to start to faint from the heat. I noticed that someone touched me from the back and another person grabbed my arm. I couldn't believe what was happening. I decided to get off the next stop and wait until the subway clears out. Once I got out, I decided to go grab a coffee to kill some time. Once I get to the coffee shop, I realized that everything inside my purse were gone. Everything clicked. I'm like I literally just got robbed and everyone around me was in on it. It felt like this was an operation. I was shocked. I was so mad. Luckily, I was safe, but I lost everything. My wallet, cash, personal items and such. This is my worst experience riding the subway in New York City. I can't imagine how many times these people do this a day in the subway. Be careful out there.